All right, this webinar is being recorded and we're going to get started. Amanda, would you like to take it away?
Sure thing. Hi, folks. Everyone should be able to see my screen. I'll be sharing some slides with more information. My name is Amanda Swanson. I am the Digital Director at Healthcare for America Now. So I am the one who is running all of our social media channels, putting together any graphics, sample messaging that you guys might see. And today we're going to talk about all of the basics and a little bit more towards the advanced side of posting, engaging, and how to be an advocate and an influencer on social media. So first thing we're going to talk about is why social media. Why is it important? I'm sure you guys all already know a little bit about why, but we'll get into it in a little more detail. Then we'll go through some best practices, the ways we tell stories online, and how you can make your story even more engaging. We'll go through a little bit of information about some recent advancements with Medicare drug price negotiation. And then we'll talk more about how you can get involved in person and online, and wrap up with any final questions. As Eve mentioned, please feel free to post any questions in the chat and we'll get to them right at the end so we can kind of get through this presentation first. So why social media? I think we all know at this point that social media is one of the most important aspects of messaging when it comes to advocacy, especially political advocacy. It used to be that we had this national conversation, which meant really a lot of smaller, more localized conversations happening around a story in a local newspaper or a political campaign in a particular state. But at this point, it is actually a legitimate term. Every single day, we are inundated with information about things happening around the world. We can find information on anything from Taylor Swift to a government shutdown, and it's going to be in our face all the time. Social media has become one of the most important pieces of our social and political consciousness. It's where a lot of us learn not just the day's news, but how to interpret it. And as a result, our political advocacy has to follow suit. Even our legislators are extremely active online, and a lot of them, not just the young ones, are posting on their own accounts. If any of you follow Chuck Grassley or have wanted to follow Chuck Grassley, he is famous for posting his own tweets. He doesn't have somebody doing it for him like a lot of people do. And he posts a lot of pictures of farm equipment around this time of year. So if you're interested in that, I'd recommend checking it out. In the past, we had a very particular kind of pipeline for how we would do social advocacy and how organizations would kind of get the word out about how things were going. Usually, people would send an email blast to people who had signed up to be on their list. We would ask members to take action. Emails have notoriously low open rates, and the people who were opening them are typically the people who are already your diehard supporters. So that meant that you're getting a really, really low rate of return on the effort that you're putting in. You're also not convincing anybody for the most part. Even if somebody, kind of haphazardly signed up for your email list, they're probably not going to click on it, open the email, read all the way through, and get all the way to the action. But now things work a little differently. We still send email blasts, we still send texts, but we also promote all of the activities that we're doing, as well as the message that we're trying to get out on social media. That means activists can post their own stories, which is incredible, but they can also post the messaging that we put out. They can communicate with graphics, and they can also communicate directly with their members of Congress and other leaders. They can tweet at them, they can DM them specifically, and that means that it's a lot easier to get in touch. It also means that the members of Congress can't ignore it as easily, right? Everyone can see when we're tweeting, we're DMing, we're posting graphics, everyone can see that we're engaging online. So that means it's a lot harder to ignore. It looks pretty bad if you're ignoring something that everyone can see. If you're wondering if it works, the short answer is yeah, it does. Even as long ago as 2014, 84% of members of Congress, members of Congress are 80% more likely to use social media and to feel more accountable to their constituents because of it. We see time and time again people changing their minds, not just members of Congress, but huge brands, corporations, about what they're doing because social media has allowed information to go viral, reach more people, and push for change. So how do we do this ourselves? It can feel really daunting to engage with social media, especially because it feels like it's always changing. We constantly see stories about the new happenings at Twitter, new platforms being introduced, the possibility of bans on platforms like TikTok, and it can be really difficult to decide not only how we engage with social media personally, but how to get our stories out there in a way that ultimately gets towards our goals as advocates. So there's a few kind of best practices to telling a compelling story on social media. Usually what we refer to as for good content is keeping it clicky and keeping it sticky. Essentially, we want something that's going to grab the attention of a person who is just scrolling through their feed, but we also want to keep their attention. A lot of times, and I'm sure we all do this, we might glance at something that's coming across our feed for a second, but not really think too much about it and keep going. It's a really big deal to keep that attention, especially when we're telling stories around our advocacy work. There's some big rules around it. First, we want to use an and, but, therefore formula, right? So insulin prices are sky high and Americans are already struggling to pay for them. But big pharma cares more about profits, and that's why we need lower drug prices. So using that formula, you present information, you present a reason why people should care about it, and you offer them a sort of solution to it as well. Use figures of speech, and that also includes kind of like popular hashtags, meme language, or trends that are going around on the internet. If you can engage with one of those, it can often take your content to people who wouldn't normally be thinking about it. You really want to play to emotion, and the three emotions that will get you the most response are awe, anger, and anxiety. And it can feel kind of uncomfortable initially to try and write down things that are trying to inspire these really robust emotions in people. But ultimately, that's the best way that we can get people fired up and ready to push for change. Make sure that you're using elements that people will remember. And a lot of that can just be aspects of your own story. We've seen time and time again that some of the most compelling messaging on social media is stuff that is personal. People feel connected when you tell pieces of your story, more so than if you're just offering up things like statistics. And that kind of goes into the characteristics of what it looks like to tell a good story. Tell the truth, maintain consistency, and infuse your personality. You don't have to, talk the way that another organization talks or another advocate talks. When you put your personality and the way that you speak into your content, it shows and it goes farther. People want something unique, not just something canned. And we've developed a very good radar after 20 years of social media at figuring out what is canned. Use characters people will root for, and that character can often be you. As I said, personal stories are some of the best ways to go wide on social media, and it's because people will root for you. You are the character, and they want to hear your story. As much as you can, try and complete the story, but I think for a lot of us, especially as advocates, we're telling stories that don't quite have an end yet, right? We're telling how our lives are impacted by government policies and why we want those policies to change or for new ones to be put in place. So obviously we don't really have an end to that story, but we do have a why. And that's how you leave people wanting more. They want to hear what the end of your story is going to be, and they want to be part of it. The number one thing that I want any of you to take away from this, if you don't pay attention to what I'm saying at all, you completely zone out, just give me this one thing. Always say in your post what you want people to know. Do not rely on them to click through to a blog. Do not rely on them to open a graphic or watch a video or even expand a post that's a little bit long. People don't want to do that. Even Facebook counts if you post a video on Facebook, a view is if somebody watches it for 3 seconds. And in 3 seconds, you're not really getting any information. So if there's something you want to say, if there is a point that you want to make that front and center. Don't push them to go read an article. Don't push them to go to another page because it's simply just not going to happen. You've got one shot to kind of hook your audience. Don't squander it. So when you're building your story, especially doing the work that we do, the whole point is to inspire action. And when we're telling our stories or the stories of people around us, we want to kind of follow a formula. You want to talk about the crisis, right? The thing that's happening, that's why we want to change things. The opportunity to change it, be it a policy that's already kind of in the works, something we're all pushing for, an election, and then you want to talk about the action to that change, right? So that can be pushing people to join something in person, but it can also be pushing people to share that information far and wide. Also, it's great to tell your story over time. You don't have to just do one and done. You can use threads, you can make multiple posts, you can tell things in a drawn out fashion. I know this seems counterintuitive to like telling people what you want them to hear right away, but you can do that in multiple avenues, right? You can tell a story in multiple parts in a way that's engaging and still kind of gives people the information that you want them to have, just in different little bits. Hashtags are something that I get questions about a lot from people, and it can be incredibly confusing. I think we all were part of sort of the era where hashtags were just kind of ingratiated into sentences, and it's always changing what algorithms are going to favor, the etiquette behind using certain hashtags. I'd say the general rule of thumb is use hashtags on Twitter or X, as Elon has now made it. But on things like Facebook and Instagram, they're just not as important, especially on Facebook, where it's just almost impossible to actually get any data around how wide any particular hashtag is going. It's not really very important. And because, so many Facebook profiles that are sharing your stuff are completely private, just to friends, you're not going to push anything farther by adding hashtags to your posts. Kind of similarly, as Instagram continues to try and change things up to compete with TikTok, they're really not prioritizing hashtags as a way to put your content in front of more people. Whereas if you engage with a trending hashtag on Twitter, you're more likely to be kind of brought into this thrall of the story being told and have your content seen by people monitoring that story. So in summary, always hashtag on Twitter, at least one, but no more than 3. Otherwise, you're likely to get kind of framed as a spam bot. That's been one of Elon Musk's like big crusades, is his insistence that there's all of these spam bots taking over Twitter. And unfortunately, what that means for us is that we have to be careful in the way that we're packaging our content and presenting our stuff. If you have too many hashtags, it can make it look like you are a spam bot. and just don't worry about it as much on Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram, you can include it, but it's just not going to really get you anywhere. So some of you might have seen this before. HCAN provides resources, including social media toolkits, around major events and victories. So that can be holidays, that can be things like the anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act. And we will typically offer sample posts, suggested hashtags, and graphics for you to use. I'm sure you guys will be seeing this around. I usually do it for all kinds of holidays. I think I usually even do a Halloween one, so you might be seeing some in the next few weeks. But they're really great resources, not only to kind of build out and flex your muscles for how to talk about healthcare, taxes, all the issues that we work on your own social media channels, but also to provide you with things like graphics that not all of us have the capacity to build in our daily lives, right? A couple of things that I think are important to note. Some social media platforms have really cracked down on copy paste content. So what that means is if you just looked at the document that I sent, grabbed like a little piece of the sample messaging, plopped it in your account, tweeted it out, posted it, and like 20 other people did the same thing, the algorithm's not going to favor your content. So it's going to actively suppress it and squash it down so that fewer people are seeing it. That's one of Elon's many like big anti-bot crusades, right? So that means it's really important to personalize sample posts as much as you can. But the nice thing about that, and I know Eve mentioned that it's kind of a daunting task for her too, right? And it can be. You're presented this, what seems to be like a nice wrapped up little bow of a message, and you have to kind of go in and pull it apart and make it your own. But it doesn't have to be big changes. Even small wording changes, saying pushing instead of fighting, right? Things like that can really make the difference and tell the algorithm like, hey, don't worry, I'm not with all these people, I promise. Just make it into your own voice, right? If you were going to explain what this piece of messaging says to a friend, how would you say it? Because I promise that the way that I write it and the way that you write it are going to be totally different, but they'll still have the same core value, and that's what's really important. Be sure to use the same hashtags if you're posting on Twitter, though, just because that helps engage with the conversation and let us all make a big splash together, especially if there's things like tweet storms or days of action. When you engage with that hashtag, especially on a platform like Twitter that has recently kind of been penalizing more progressive conversations, it's a really big deal to get our content on the boards. So a couple of final thoughts, and I'm going to address a few things that I think folks might be wondering about. Social media is a constantly changing landscape. I'm sure we are all kind of always seeing the stuff that Elon Musk is getting up to on a regular basis. He's constantly changing or threatening to change different aspects about Twitter. And then now we also have all of these kind of Twitter replacements that are popping up because it seems as though Elon Musk is driving Twitter itself into the ground. What I'll say about those is a couple things. First, it seems like Threads, which is the kind of new Twitter-esque platform that was introduced by Meta, so it's related directly to Facebook and Instagram, is trying to become the heir apparent to this kind of like short form content that Twitter has popularized. There's a couple things about posting about it. It's really difficult to pull any kind of numbers or information. It's difficult to know how well a hashtag or a conversation is doing, other than kind of the basic, like how many reposts did you get? That said, it is a good platform. It's the easiest one to get involved with. You can connect it directly to your Instagram, your Facebook. And unlike things like Blue Sky, you don't have to have an invite to get in. So if you're wondering where to go, if you're looking to kind of jump off Twitter's sinking ship, first I'd say stick around for a while. It might even back out, but I'd also say that Threads is probably your best bet. But overall, just keep learning. Social media will always be changing. There will always be new functions and new issues that people are talking about with it. Ask questions and don't shy away from experimenting on your own. Every single person who is an expert in social media started out just kind of messing around, because the thing about it is there's not a huge science to this. A lot of it is just right place, right time, and throwing something at the wall to see what sticks. So tell your story in your voice, keep pushing forward, and if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. Here's a few accounts I'd say following for inspiration for the kind of work we do. Americans for Tax Fairness has one of the best digital teams in the country. They are doing incredible work, and they're even on TikTok, which I'm not even posting on TikTok myself. So they're clearly ahead of the game there. Social Security Works also has great and interesting content around Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I would not be a very good digital director if I did not tell you all to follow us. I post so much on all of our platforms, and we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads. We're on Reddit. We haven't posted much, but we are on Reddit. So feel free to follow us as well. And then if you want to be a huge nerd about this, feel free to follow Dr. Alan Rosenblatt, who's on Twitter at Dr. Digipol. He is a digital professional who is one of the best and most innovative in the field. He teaches about social media and advocacy at George Washington and American University. And he's kind of a mad genius of internet advocacy and has pioneered so much of the best practices that we talk about. Also, if you're more of a reader, which I am, here's a few great options to just learn more about social media, how to get involved and how to become a real digital organizer. A lot of these get really more into the nitty-gritty and are especially great if you are a campaigner, if you're doing political campaigns, anything like that. So any of these are great. If you're going to start somewhere, I would recommend the very first one, How to Go Viral and Reach Millions. It is a great introduction on how to tell a compelling story, but it also pushes into sort of the deeper whys and more insights into why this works. And it makes it so much easier to think through the stories you're telling. So I know we have some questions in the chat, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Right now, I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Jordan Hevenor, sorry, Jordan, who's going to talk a little bit about Medicare drug price negotiation, which is a huge hot topic for us and very popular on the internet.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I just wanted to briefly take this chance to touch on the Medicare prescription drug price negotiations that are ongoing in the process, because it is something that comes up on the internet. It's a place where you can tell your story both digitally and in other platforms. And so I thought it would be a good issue to discuss to help frame the idea of what we might be talking about on social media. So on September 1st, CMS named it was actually before September 1st, but that's when it went into effect. The first 10 drugs that Medicare is going to negotiate prescription drug prices for. So you can see these drugs listed here. And you're going to see like a lot of content from HCAN on this and a lot of content just out in the media about these 10 drugs. And if you or any of your family members have experiences with these drugs, then telling that story is going to be a huge part of helping to shape the narrative on the prescription drug price negotiations. Because the other thing, so far it's held up in courts, but some of the pharmaceutical companies and the US Chamber had filed lawsuit to not allow this to go into implementation. And with that, I want to go into the next slide. The reason this is so important is this has a really long implementation window. As you can see here, it's 2023, which is now, are the first 10 drugs are announced. And then it's not until 2026 that these negotiations are going to go into effect. So there are other reforms that are happening in this process with Medicare along the way, but the 10 drugs are actually not going to go into effect for the negotiations until 2026. So we think it's really important to keep the pressure up on this so we get to full implementation of this policy. And in the process, not only do we work towards implementation of this policy, but there's legislation in the House of Representatives that would add to the number of drugs you can negotiate and allow private plans to negotiate the same way. So expanding the reach of those who are impacted and helped by this. And so we think of the narrative, like Amanda was talking about, this is going to be an ongoing narrative that we want to continue to press forward so that we get to 2026 when these 10 drugs are, will have lower drug prices, then will be negotiated. And then hopefully by then we've been able to expand it going forward. And just the narrative here is kind of just like what Amanda said with so many other things. It's the opportunity to educate voters about which side of the prescription drug price issue their elected leaders are on. It's which side are you on? And I think, you know, Amanda sort of summarized it well about, you know, the and then how you take action. And so going forward, HCAN will have places to take action along this process, and it'll be part of the toolkits that we share out about where you can take action. But I wanted to highlight it tonight so you can think about your own stories and if you're impacted by these 10 drugs, if somebody in your family is impacted by these 10 drugs, and kind of work on building your own personal narrative to share and maybe a narrative that can be shared in other places. And so you can obviously reach out to Eve should any of those stories come up. And with that, I can pass it to you, Eve, right? You're next.
Yeah, you know, of course, Amanda wants you to know that if you have any questions, you can send her an email at aswanson@healthcareforamericanow.org. Amanda, do you want to post that in the chat? Awesome. So a couple of things we want to try to invite you to. First off, if you're in the Charleston, West Virginia area, or if you want to make the drive, we will be having a demonstration on October 11th, centered around healthcare. We will be talking about at this press event and demonstration about how insurance companies are basically profiteering off of our care. They made $260 billion annually by denying care, and maybe 0.1 to 0.2% of denied claims are successfully appealed. They make it so burdensome, so difficult to appeal. And it's just become so automatic. If you hit our Facebook page or our Twitter, you'll see there was a recent article, a recent news coverage of the fact that AI is involved in the automatic denial system within a lot of insurance companies. And it's so automatic. There's no way that a human being has a chance to actually review a potential denial before approving the denial, before saying, yes, this is officially denied. So that ain't right. We need to be vocal about that. We need to say that this needs to change. And we can do that peacefully. And we can also do that loudly. Just because you're peaceful doesn't mean you have to be quiet and shy about it. So we're going to be holding signs and raising our voices a little bit, but peacefully and safely in downtown Charleston on October 11th at 11:30 a.m. I have, this is where the short link is there in the slide. I'm going to post the text in the chat so you can get the link directly. And there we go. And the next slide, please. And of course, you've come to a webinar that's hosted by both Healthcare for America Now and by your own local West Virginia Citizen Action. And West Virginia Citizen Action would like to invite you to volunteer. And this is a short link where you can go and you can check box in that form the ways that you might want to volunteer. Maybe you're more of a stay-at-home digital activist kind of person who gets super excited about being able to share posts and customize them and spread the word, help educate the public on important topics, amplify messaging. But maybe you might also want to get a little more active. Maybe you might be interested in door canvassing or things like that will be happening on October 11th, what we call a direct action. Get on there, volunteer, let us know how you'd like to volunteer so we can help you become more active in a way that you like. I'm going to share that information in the chat so you've got a nice, easy use, quick link. And I think now is the time when Amanda will be answering some questions.
Yes, I will leave this up here in case folks want to check out how to volunteer while we're talking through some stuff. I see a couple of questions. The first one from Deanna about how to separate your personal accounts from your public accounts. That depends on the platform and it kind of depends on your preferences. So if you're running an organization's account, obviously it's pretty easy to keep things separate. If you want to, as an individual person, have kind of your own stuff and then also more public facing activism stuff, I would suggest either having multiple accounts, or if it's something like Instagram, you can actually kind of curate a close friends list for things like your stories. So even if you're posting a lot of advocacy and public facing content on your main feed or on your story as well, you can still create little stories that are just for people in a select list. So that's one way that I see people kind of do that. But you can also absolutely just have multiple different accounts and have some of them be private just for you and your family and friends, and the other one be public facing and, you know, open to whoever wants to see them. So I'd say it's just a matter of your preferences and how comfortable you are with sharing different things. The next question about Facebook, how to rebuild an audience, and especially after neglecting a presence. Facebook can be so tricky because the algorithm gets so upset if you're not posting consistently. And unfortunately, the best way to kind of get back from a hiatus or neglecting a page is to just really post as consistently as you can. Even when I am like offline from HCAN and out of town, I have it scheduled so that we have at least one Instagram or Facebook post every day. Facebook gets really finicky, and the more consistent you are with your posting, the better. I know some people who post 4 or even 5 times a day on Facebook, which is quite a lot and definitely not feasible for the vast majority of us. So I would say just try and be as consistent as you can. If you know you're going to kind of enter a period where you're not going to be able to engage as much online, try the scheduling feature. It's really, really effective. It makes it a lot easier for you to be able to log off while still not neglecting your online presence. And yeah, that's what I'd say about that. And yes, Hootsuite is great. The one thing I will say is it's no longer compatible with Twitter. TweetDeck is the same way because Elon, I don't know why this one, he gets very upset about, he doesn't want, I think it's something similar with the bots. He doesn't want third-party platforms to be able to post. That said, it is pretty easy to be able to post and schedule things through like Twitter's sort of mainframe platform. And it's super easy to schedule on Instagram and Facebook as well. The only thing I will say is that on Facebook, you cannot schedule to share a post. So if an individual or another page has made a post and you want to share it and you want that to be part of your kind of social media schedule, that has to be the most immediate one you're doing, because it does not let you schedule that in the same way that Twitter does let you schedule a retweet. And I know it's frustrating because every single one of them has different rules and they are always changing, but that is at this present moment the best information. All right, I think that is the end of the questions. So I'm actually gonna pull down the screen share. Okay.
It looks like somebody did ask a question about the demonstration on October 11th. It will be outside of a building where an insurer is located, but it will be on the sidewalk in a public space.
And if you're in the West Virginia region, you should go check it out. Take your online advocacy offline, and you can make it do both. Post pictures and stories from that action on your account, really help make it make a big splash. And tag your members of Congress too.
That's right. And after the action, there will be pizza. So you can come back to the CAG office, hang out on the couch, and eat some pizza and say, hey, we did a thing. So there'll be some fun decompression time after the event and some visiting. So that's another reason to go. Demonstrate for a good cause, and there's pizza. I mean, you can't do better than that. Well, thank you so much, Amanda and Jordan, for running this Digital Activism Run 101. We are so happy to have had you. We did great. It's not even 45 minutes later. Oh, Warren says pizza, aka the great inducement to rue them all.
Yeah, that's the difficulty with online activism. There's no pizza involved.
That's right. It's
I mean, I guess you can order your own
emojis, maybe. Well, thank you all so much. Is there any other questions? No other questions? Well, just to let you know, we did record, and we will be posting this recording on YouTube, and I will share it out with everyone who registered, because it looks like there were a fair few who didn't make it on tonight but did register online. So we'll make sure everybody gets the link. And Sally did provide us with a pizza emoji. That's awesome. Would Amanda, Jordan, is there anything you would like to add here before we end?
Thank you for having us and putting it together and all the work you did to turn people out. It was great to participate in it, and it's wonderful to see all the engagement and interest. So just keep us posted how we can be supportive and helpful as things move forward. And if we need to put together Digital Activism 201.
Ooh, that sounds great. We'll have to think on that for later.
And again, my email is in the chat. If anyone has any questions, just feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to talk through ideas, answer questions, no matter how basic they might seem. And I'm excited to see everybody's online advocacy.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.